As part of the popular 32 deck challenge, I set out to challenge myself to make a mono blue deck that wasn't just a bunch of counterspells and control parts of the board. And I also didn't want to do just another cheap sort of self-mill, Aether Reservoir, Thassa's Oracle kind of deck. And as much as they are fun, I didn't want Baral or Urza anywhere near the deck. So, I was stumped. But then, I heard the siren song of the sea calling me. Eluge, the Shoreless Sea, is a standout commander for one of my favorite sets, Bloomburrow. It's a 4-drop commander for 1 colorless and 3 blue that says Eluge's power and toughness are each equal to the number of islands you control. Whenever Eluge enters or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. The first instance or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 1 blue or 1 generic mana less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it. Now you might be thinking, Eluge is a perfect commander to be running a bunch of instance and sorcery spells to allow you to control the board and maybe chain some extra turns together and things like that and cast these for free or nearly free. And you'd be right. Eluge is actually a really good commander to do that. If you don't want to get, invited back to your local LGS or your family dinner table. Shame on you. In this version of Eluge, I wanted something that was a little bit more mid-rangey and casual, allowing you to sit back and let the board state develop in front of you before ultimately making some moves to win the game. This Eluge deck is, at the time of this recording, a bracket 2 deck that brings together themes of lands matter with sea creatures that have island walk that provide a lot of interaction and fun at the table. There are no game changers in this deck. One of the big downsides to Eluge is that it does not have island walk. Though I will admit that it would have been a pretty busted card if every turn Eluge attacked, it could make itself unblockable. To get around that, we have to hit the Wayback Machine and grab a couple of cards that give creatures island walk. The first is Fish Liver Oil, that for 1 generic and 1 blue gives any creature island walk. The second is Part Water, that for 1 blue and 2 times X generic mana allows you to give that many creatures island walk until end of turn. And the third is Piracy Charm from Time Spiral Remastered, and you've got a few ways to make creatures unblockable with Island Walk. At first glance, it might not seem like a lot in terms of output, but when you pair this with bigger sea creatures like Tolarian Terror, Starwinder, and Serpent of the Endless Sea, you can dish out a lot of damage in a short amount of time as a finisher to the game. And that's not the only way we can make our big creatures unblockable. There's also Spreading Seas, Security Bypass, and Aqueous Form, which the last two are staples for me when I run them in Voltron decks where I need the commander to deal combat damage to trigger something important for the deck. Serpent of Yawning Depths that gives our Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, Octopi, and Serpents to only be able to be blocked by Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses / Octopi, and Serpents. So that card's a little situational, but it's still useful as a creature. And then there's also Tideshaper Mystic that allows you to tap it and target land becomes the basic land type of your choice until end of turn. Finally, there's Deep Channel Mentor that allows all blue creatures to be unblockable. It's just a great merfolk that I include in any heavy blue deck. Our Island Walk creatures are the real stars of this deck, and the biggest and the baddest is Inkwell Leviathan, a 7 power, 11 toughness artifact Leviathan for 9 mana that has Island Walk, Trample, and Shroud. 9 mana is a lot, but there is some ramp throughout the deck to help. In addition to our Leviathan friend, we have Stormtide Leviathan for 8 mana with Island Walk, and it turns all lands into islands in addition to their other types, and it limits creatures without flying and Island Walk from attacking. Again, it's expensive, but it brings a lot of value to the table. Finally, in our big boy department is Colossal Whale, another 8-drop sea creature with Island Walk that says, whenever Colossal Whale attacks, you may exile target creature defending player controls until Colossal Whale leaves the battlefield. This one is both a finisher and a board control wrapped up in one card. You can protect it with Swiftfoot Boots, and you can essentially start dealing out lethal damage in the late game at will. Not all of our sea creatures with Island Walk are super expensive finishers. Creatures like Inkfathom Divers, Merfolk Spy, and the Flood of Mars are all cheap to mid-range creatures that can help plink away opponents' life totals, while Eluge hands out Flood tokens like candy on Halloween. If you want to go further on the cheap end, you can add Rishadan Dakan and Stoneybrook Banneret. Both are listed in the maybe board for this deck list. To further lean into the lands matter theme of the deck, we've added Grappling Kraken, a 6-drop creature with landfall that taps target creature and opponent controls and puts a stun counter on it. There's also Guardian of Tazim. It does a similar tap effect, but it doesn't let the target untap during its next untap phase. While a Sphinx is technically not a sea creature, its ability to help control the board was too good to ignore. There are additional options for Ruin Crab and Wind Rider Eel if you want to add more landfall to the deck. However, I want to stay away from Mill, with the exception of the Water Crystal's secondary ability. Speaking of ramp, the aforementioned Water Crystal is joined by a Sapphire Medallion, Soul Ring, and Kefnet's Monument to help us get out these big sea creatures faster. We have also added extra planar lens to the deck to allow all of our islands to tap for 2 mana instead of 1. Now's probably a good time to talk about some of the more fun cards we have in the deck. Reservoir Kraken is a sea creature for 2 generic and 2 blue with Trample and Ward 2 that says, at the beginning of each combat, if it is untapped, any opponent may tap an untapped creature they control. If they do, tap Reservoir Kraken and create a 1/1 blue fish creature token that cannot be blocked. Yeah, it's silly. Yes, there are probably better cards to replace it with, but I love the interaction of forcing one of my opponents to tap a creature to give me an unblockable fish. And if they don't, I've got a 6/6 with Trample that's coming their way. The next card is similar in style, called Spawning Kraken. It's a 6-drop creature for 5 generic and 1 blue that says, whenever a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent you control deals combat damage to a player, create a 9/9 blue Kraken creature token. Put one of our mini evasion tokens on one of our mini Krakens and Leviathans, and start printing 9/9 creatures each turn. Finally, there's probably the silliest card in this deck, and that's Shark Typhoon. It reads, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. And there are a decent amount of non-creature cards in this deck that you can cast at a reduced cost thanks to Eluge. So have fun making your own Sharknado. And let's talk about all those cards you're going to be able to play for free or reduced cost. Because, as you can imagine, there are a decent amount of instants and sorceries in the deck to help you turn the tide of the game. Get it? Turn the tide? There are 17 pieces of removal in this deck, though not all of them are instants and sorceries. There's the obvious counterspell, cancel, and offer you can't refuse, and negate to help you block powerful creatures and effects before they get to the board. But there's also Raven Form, Run Away Together, one of my favorite cards from Throne of Eldraine, and Strix Serenade to deal with problems already on the board. For card advantage, we've got Opt, Consider, and Lorien Revealed, as well as Windfall and Blue Sun Zenith to help us get to our win conditions a little quicker. And finally, we have 2 pieces of Theft in Blue Sun's Twilight and Invoke the Winds, which will allow us to snatch creatures or an artifact and either stop an opponent from using it, or give us an advantage to steal the deal. Now let's talk about 2 pieces of life gain I chose to include in the deck. The first is Kraken's Eye, an aptly named artifact for 2 colorless mana that says, whenever a player plays this blue spell, you gain 1 life. You can gain a lot of life off this card even if one other player has blue in their deck. The second is even more gnarly, and that's Staff of the Mind Magus, a 3-drop artifact that says, whenever you cast a blue spell or an island enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. These are both great little complements to a Lands Matter deck that can give you an early advantage or a saving grace late in the game. And to round out our artifacts, I included Conjurer's Closet because why not blink Eluge at the end step and make even more flood counters? Flood the entire board! Go wild! And that's how I would build an Eluge deck. But there's many ways to build this really fun commander. Tell me down in the comments below how you would build it. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single one of my deck building videos. Until next time, I've been Mallow, and you've been awesome.